It's loading right now.
Right. 6:30.
It's live right now.
I always I always feel like I'm right on top of the camera.
I don't know.
Okay, you ready? Trustee Steve, you ready, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, let's call this meeting to order, 5:35 p.m., which is the Village of Dalton Board of Trustees Finance Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, time being 5:35. And I want to do a quick roll call. So I have Trustee Steve,
Present.
Trustee House is present, and Trustee Brown is absent. So we do have 2 of 3. We have a quorum to keep moving forward. We start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I briefly can, in lieu of doing the prayer, I think there's a lot of things going on in our community. So I'll just say if we can observe a 10-minute moment of silence for the family of Mr. Floyd, as well as prayer over our community that everybody will come to work on an amenable solution. So 10-minute moment of silence, 10-second moment of silence.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, with that being said, we're gonna go into our agenda, which we set our normal agenda. And I wanna just make some brief comments because I think I recognized in preparing for the meeting that we've had the same finance committee for about a month, for about a year now. So I just took a couple minutes to kind of reflect back on what I hope we've done, or hope the direction that we are going in. I do want to thank those that help us to put these together. We have Giovanni's done a great job of getting those Zoom conferences coordinated for us and making sure that we're able to get it out to the community. Behind the scenes, Derek Blocker is making sure that the IT is there. Chris has faithfully been with us from the finance department to be able to answer things off the right away that we couldn't do. Our administrator is generally available as well to answer questions. Of course, the finance committee with Trustee Steve dedicating his time, Trustee Brown as well. And then most importantly, the residents that give a lot of feedback, and I would say, I think with the regularity of our meetings have had more interest. So thanks to everybody for what they've done. We have structured the meetings. I think I hope we've done a good job of setting a format and having some consistency so that the community knows what's going on or has a better idea and in terms of the financials. I do think we want to, with this next year up to come, reflect back and see that we try to work on different ways to raise the bar and work collectively on adding more value and adding more resources. So, but that's just kind of my takeaway. I did talk a little bit with you, Trustee Steve. So I wanted to see if you may have some thoughts on our committee on things that we may have done well, and things that maybe we could push to do a little bit better. And then I do always solicit feedback from the community as well on things that we could do to try to improve these meetings and make them more beneficial.
Are you okay? Ready for me?
Yes, sir.
I think everything has been great so far. You know, I think I had the privilege of watching different trustees and different boards over the last 6 years, as far as just they're really recording them and being there every month. You have to listen. So I think we're doing a great job. I think with the finance committee, we're letting the public know what's going on with our finances. And before the COVID hit, with the finances of the village were drastically improving. Now there's still a little monkey wrench in, but the fact that we have these meetings and we get a clear explanation of what's going on with the village finances, which is very important, because the village finances have not always been in the best condition. But me as a newly elected trustee, these committee meetings on the finances help me really understand the finances better, so I can better represent the finances when I'm asked from residents, what's going on with the money of the village, or this is going on, this is going on. I can give a proper answer, and it's not, just me throwing something together, pulling something out the air. So I think moving forward, we got to keep consistency is key, and we got to keep doing it.
Okay. Thank you for that feedback. If you think of anything, of course, and we talk all the time, but I wanted to make sure that we discuss it maybe in open format for everybody that does contribute from the administration as well as the residents. I want to make sure that we do recognize that feedback is critical. And while we try to put some things together, there's always room that we can grow. So that was a moment I just wanted to take to reflect. But that being said, the format that we've laid out are things that we have identified. The old business is always things that we've identified as crucial that we want to maintain, or maybe something that we stumbled on in the past and we want to make sure it does not occur again. New business are things that may fit in the financials that we want to push forward, but they may not be reoccurring. So that's why some of the information may be a bit redundant, but it's very important that we consistently monitor our general fund and our Melanie Fitness Center fund and the water fund, because those are the areas that need the most attention, and make sure that things remain on the right path. So with that, I'm going to jump into our financials. I'm going to do a brief, it's one additional page that we don't normally look at, but I want to make sure that the community and the board and the residents are key, because we do highlight all of the same funds each time. So in the financial packet, which I believe went out in the email for everybody, and I'm sure the board has it, we have the first page, which is always the cover page. Our second page, the table of contents, I want to stop to look on that for a quick minute, because on the table of contents, we normally talk about general fund, water fund, and Melanie Fitness Center. But I want to highlight to the community that if you look through that page on its own, it will show you that we have the general fund, of course, which we talk about, the water fund. We also have a sewer fund, which is a separate account that's being managed all the time. The Melanie Fitness Center, the motor fuel tax fund, 3 TIFs, 4 TIFs, several TIF funds, as well as our debt service fund. So I bring that up because while we're talking about a few funds, there are definitely more things going on within our financials that I want to make sure the community is aware of, so that when certain things are brought about within our financials, it's out there for everybody to view and check on their own. But we also want to we also recognize the work that's being done by others to keep that in place. So moving into our normal funds that we do talk about, if you're looking at it digitally, it's going to be page 14. But on the, if you had it printed out as page 11, we're going into our general fund, which these financials represent the money or our revenue for our year, for the year end, which is April 30th. So our fiscal year for 2019 has now, I'm sorry, 2020 has concluded, which would show that we have, I'm looking for the total here. A operating, okay, Trust Steve, I lost you.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh. Okay, yeah, it shows that for the year, for the month of April, we had an operating loss of $48,852. Fiscal year to date, an operating surplus of $1,149,407.98 in the general fund. So by comparison to what we're looking at, again, it looks like we've come out in a good position. As the audit comes, our audit does two things. It verifies that we've been tracking things well. So we want to make sure that the numbers that we have in here can be cross-checked by an independent company. But there are always adjustments to this total. And the sign of how well we've been doing is going to be whether or not those adjustments are minor or major. But at this point, we have a $1,149,000 operating surplus, and that's from our day-to-day operations. That does not take into consideration, if you look below that, it has other financing sources. That is the utilization of loans and one-time revenue adjustments that might not be reoccurring. But if I can pause for a moment, I think Chris, you're on here. So I always use you to correct me if I misspoke or elaborate if there's something that might be a little bit more clarity for the board and for the community.
There is one thing I do want to add. This is before posting of all of the accruals. The accruals are expenses that or revenues that you have earned during the fiscal year, but you have not yet received them. An easy example would be an invoice for the services were performed in April, but the village hasn't paid it until May. Those have not yet been recorded. Those will be recorded after year end. So these numbers will change because of all the accruals. So your sales tax revenues that you guys have earned in March and April but have not yet received are not reflected yet. So those will be adjusting both your revenue and your expenses to these financials.
Okay, in your, if you had to guesstimate, and if I'm asking you to guess too hard, don't let me know. It's kind of difficult to attain. Do you think that those accruals will have significant impact? And when I say significant, more than a $250,000 fluctuation on the revenue versus expenses?
I would guesstimate yes, because this year we have, with everything with COVID, is going to have a significant impact on revenues, decreasing it. Because usually there won't be much of a change for revenues in your accruals just because it's the same year after year. March and April will be March and April the following year. But with COVID and all the shutting down the businesses and everything, a lot of your revenues that you would get from the state, those have changed. So you're going to get a lot less than you normally would in previous years. Because of the fact that businesses were shut down in March and April. So your revenue accruals are going to be less than they were the previous year. So you're going to have a higher fluctuation in your revenue accruals.
Okay. So then the one other question I have, and well, Trustee Steve, do you have any questions before I continue?
No.
Okay, the one other question I have to that then, because at the moment we're looking at what looks like a very good revenue over expenses, 1.1 million. There will be adjustments. How long do you think it may be before we have a more accurate representation of our fiscal year end? And I ask that because when the audit comes, I always try to compare what they say with what our final closeout is.
So it usually takes 2 to 3 months for all of the accruals to be either received or incurred or posted. So, because your state income taxes, those are 2 months in behind. So the revenue you would receive in April are for February activity. So you won't receive April's sales tax until the end of June.
Is there any site that, even though we won't receive the funds, that would give us an indication of how much is out there in terms of like receivables for us?
I'll look into it. I don't think so. There is a site where you can pull the information, but when you pull the information, you've already received the cash. So it's at the same time.
Okay, yeah, so that wouldn't work well. Okay, so in that sense, we're looking at a $1.1 million revenue over expenses. However, there will be some fluctuation, and then that's something that I think we, as the village, want to make sure that we update. I'll probably put that under old business again, just kind of to follow up, so that way we'll have a more accurate picture of where we ended this fiscal year, so that we know where we're at on a move forward basis.
Last year, what we did was after we had all of the accruals and before the financials, before the books were sent to the auditors for review, we reran the April 30th financials and provided those for review with subsequent current year month.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that, but I mean, Trustee Steve, if you have any other questions, if not, we'll...
Question, and that $1 million over accrual, I Am I saying that term right?
That surplus is before accruals.
Surplus. So do we have a surplus because of the cuts that we made, or just because we've been collecting water money? Is it where is that from?
The surplus you currently have doesn't have anything to do with the current cost savings that the village has implemented.
Okay.
Because that has not been were not reflected until, I believe, I don't know, I can't think of a specific date when those cost saving measures started to be implemented.
Okay. So
So
that's
those
just,
are not reflected in these financials.
that surplus is just from collections of water and different things that we charge for.
So, and
Those
maybe I can,
collections, part of why it's higher this year is because you have revenues that were pre-COVID. So right now you have the March and April of 19's revenue included in your overall revenue. Well, in the current year, March and April, the village was shut down, as most of all businesses, due to the COVID. Those are just one of the revenues that are currently being said. Let's say you have $1 million. Well, we all know that due to COVID, that $1 million is going to decrease because March and April, you didn't have that. A lot of businesses were shut down, meaning less revenue was being taken in, less revenue was being earned.
okay. All right, now
Okay.
here's another one. So you said in the financial, in this current packet, it does, and it includes March and April of 2019 revenue.
Yes.
And then wouldn't March and April of last year be included in fiscal year 19's financials?
No, because we have to reverse those journal. They're recorded. Maybe back up. Yes, they're included in fiscal 19's financials.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of each fiscal year, we reverse the previous year's accruals. So at the end of fiscal 19, we reversed fiscal 18's accruals.
Okay. All right, I'll talk a little bit more about that maybe later on. Steve, any more questions? Okay. So with that, we're gonna go next to the water fund, which would be on page 15 if you printed it up, and it should be page 18 on the electronic document. Let's see if I have that, where we would see in terms of the water fund, I see a April surplus of $582,000 and a fiscal year surplus of $1,266,681.52. So again, the water fund would appear that we've done well in revenues minus expenses. But I want to ask this question if I can, Chris, because we're seeing a lot of positive numbers. However, financially, I know from a cash flow standpoint, we're still kind of tight. So can you kind of speak to how we would have a surplus in both funds, from our financials, and yet still, have the challenges that we do?
So I'll start with the water fund. So the water fund, the revenue is posted at gross. So if you guys bill 300,000, 300,000 is booked to the books as what was billed.
Okay.
That does not reflect actual collections.
Okay.
So if we take into your collection rate, you don't have a surplus.
Okay.
Taking into effect collection rate.
Got it. So the water fund shows all money that we've billed, but the amount that we collect may be different.
Yes.
All right.
One thing to help with looking at the collection rate is if you go to page 15 if you're looking at electronically, and page 12 if you printed a hard copy.
Mm-hmm.
Last year-to-date receivables were 3.8 million.
That says page 15, you say?
Yeah, page 15.
Yeah, that's digitally, because I'm looking at it on my phone. 15?
On your phone, it will be
15.
15.
Okay.
And then
that's the balance sheet.
Yep. So 3.8 was last year's receivables. The current year receivables are 4.6. about a $800,000 increase in receivables.
Okay. Which would, that's a good illustration. Trustee Steve, any question?
No, I'm following along. I need to get my iPad. I'm on my computer, but this thing is a little small. So
Okay. And then last but not least, we're gonna go to the Melanie Fitness Center, which on a printed copy would be page 19. So then digitally, I believe it's page 22.
okay, I'm looking at it.
Okay, and we're showing again for the month an operating loss of $11,599. The fiscal year to date loss for the Melanie Fitness Center was $241,000. So I think we regularly talk about that. Hey, Liz, speak up every once in a while so we can see when your audio comes through.
Hello? Okay.
Okay, we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm in the water department trying to reconcile checks and stuff that I don't know what, sorry about
Okay.
that.
All right, we're live and we keep moving forward. So we're glad you joined us.
What's up, Liz?
Hey,
Okay, so we're on the we're doing a summary of the Melanie Fitness Center, $11,000 loss for the month of April, $240,000 loss fiscal year. I think we had some talk at the board meeting about the Melanie Fitness Center, so I'll ask Trustee if he wants to elaborate. I will comment that when we budgeted for a $380,000 loss. So coming in at 241,000 is not good. I think some of the work that's been done over there will reflect that there were some, we didn't end up in as bad a position as we budgeted for. However, there's still some realities that we need to deal with, and as the board has voted that we want to pursue some opportunities to sell. But Trustee Steve, you have any comments you wanted to make on the financials?
Well, no, it's pretty much right. We had the board to update the last appraisal we have and put it out there, see, put it out there for sale. Say I talked to Trustee House. He had a good idea as far as putting out an RFP to different entities to see if they're interested, because with the COVID and what's going on, it's just going to be hard to reopen Melanie Fitness at this time. So let's see if we can put it out there even in this time, see what we can get, see if we get any bites and go from there. Okay. So I'm going to be calling the appraisal place to get the updated appraisal and see what that takes. But that's what we got to, we got to make the hard decision about the bullet on that one. And just the COVID really just switched up a lot of stuff for us. So that's what it is.
All right. Thank you for that comment. So we're gonna do the next things on our old business. I'll ask Chris if you can kind of chime in a couple. We just want to kind of lump together the reason that we have the status for our bond payment as well as the water payments on here is that we, in years past, we had a missed bond payment and we missed some payments to the city of Chicago. So I put these on here mostly just to make sure that we are on track for those. So we want to have just on the record that we have looked at these and we know that we're on track. And in the event that we are not on track, we want to make sure that the board is aware of it so that collectively we can work on a plan so that all the vendors know that we will honor any payments that we owe. So Chris, if you can kind of combine the bond payment and water bill payments, just give us an overview of are we on track for those? Are those current, or are there any potential difficulties?
So your bond payments right now, you're in the status of where you guys are collecting taxes due to the distribution from the county. Your next payment will be June 1st, 2020. So the village pays bonds, interest and principal in June and December. All other times during the year, it's where you guys are collecting taxes and revenues to fund that payment. So as of right now, you are on track to make your next payment. I
Okay,
spoke with your guys' bond for the 2009 series for the June 1st interest payment. And when I spoke to them, everything was on track. To process it electronically.
okay, so we're on track for the June payment. And then in terms of the city of Chicago and our water bill payments, are those current as well?
Yes, the village is all current with its City of Chicago monthly water bill payment, and we are collecting resources to fund the once a year December payment.
Okay, and then the last I heard, I think the mayor and administrator had done some outreach to the city of Chicago regarding deferring the potential of deferring our settlement payment in the event that we have if we receive our property taxes late. Has the city
So
responded to that, or am I wording that right?
No, yeah, so I've been in talks with them. However, after talking with Chris about it, we're good on that. We already have our money to make our water bill payment in the next several months, so we're good. The deferment that they were trying to give us was for the 2.45% increase that occurs every June 1st. And also when I discussed that with Chris, that wouldn't really help us to do a deferment because they would only be willing to do the deferment for up to 9 months. And we don't really, we don't need that at this time. We may go ahead and just do it just in case as a cushion, but I don't think we're gonna need a deferment payment for the 2.45%.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Okay, anything additional on the water payment, Chris?
The next scheduled payment is going to be sometime in June when the city issues out their rate increases. So the June 1st, they effectively implemented another rate increase onto the village of the percentage Liz stated.
Okay. Any questions, Trustee Steve?
No.
All right. Next thing on our agenda, the uncollected water bills from our community. This again, we track because as we talk about, and it ties into where we talked on our financials about how we're showing a surplus of revenue minus expenses, but as Chris mentioned, we're showing what we've billed, but not necessarily what we've collected. So in our financial packet, the final page, which is page 36, if we printed it, 39, 40, if you have it digitally, would show that at this time, there are $3,899,000 worth of water bills that have not been collected, with the bulk of it, $3 million being over 120 days old. It looks like I would assume this is because of COVID, our collections from 61 to 90 and 91 to 120 have gone up higher than they normally would. So $3,899,000 of outstanding water bills in the community. So as we're talking about the need, as we talk about the balancing act of making sure that we have everything taken care of for the residents, but also we have to make sure ultimately that the bills get paid, that plays a factor in it. Trustee Steve, any elaboration?
No.
Administrator Scott, Chris, any comment?
No, I don't have any comments. We're actually in here now, reconciling checks. We do have some money. We're going to be depositing quite a bit of money from some checks that we've had. We are going to have to, at some point, look at resuming water shutoffs. And as I discussed with you, Trustee, we can look at putting it out sometime past the 4th of July to give people more than ample time. We're also willing to make payment arrangements. Today I was in the water department making payment arrangements. We will be making payment arrangements for everyone, including people who have previously broken their payment arrangements, which we typically do not do. But given the pandemic and everything going on right now, we are trying to work with the residents as much as possible. So we are going to be working on payment arrangements, and we will be giving about a month's time in order for people to come in and make arrangements before we resume water shutoffs.
Very good. And yes, and we did have that conversation. So the biggest thing being The suggestion for residents, anybody else, if there's anything, if you know you're behind on it, please be proactive starting today with trying to make arrangements and trying to do things. The shutoffs are not happening at this time, but likely within about a time frame, they will have to resume. So we wouldn't want to wait till the last minute. I think the administrator mentioned everybody, we're willing to work with anybody, but we have to know what the issue is to be able to work with it.
Do want to add one note.
Yes, sir.
That with real estate taxes being delayed in the distributions, the village is right now running on cash flow from what it collected in taxes pre-COVID and during those months in February and March. So most of its operations are currently being funded by those cash flows. Cash flow will get tight if we don't start collecting on utility bills and other payment items.
Okay.
Making it hard to fund payroll, billing, etc.
Good comment. Thank you.
And I want to say that I like Administrator Scott said, if we do start making water shutoffs again, maybe in July, put it out there a month or so ahead of time, so we can announce starting in July, we will be cutting water off, so people will know it will be out there. As all our media, all our communication channels to put out to let people know. And then come in there at the same time we make that announcement, we say, we will be cutting water off, but we are taking payment plans. Come in now and make a payment plan today.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, so the next thing up, we're going to go into new business. Under new business, one of the things we discussed at our previous finance committee meeting was that there were some employee layoffs and furloughs that were going to be scheduled to happen. I know at the rate of speed that things move, things happen, and we want to just make sure that we're all in the loop. So I think that everybody's done the best they can to communicate with us. Administrator emailed me a document of the most current updates, and I forwarded that to the board today. So it may not have been time. Actually, I would say probably about an hour ago. So that way all the board has access to the numbers from the adjustments being made. There's it appears to be about $50,000 per payroll of savings, and I don't want to say savings because that's somebody's job, but of less reduced expenses to be able to make it through on a difficult time. However, there are also employees that are taking furlough days as well, meaning that they're one day every other week, they will not be available to work. And because of that, that will impact their salary as well. So it's effectively a 10% pay cut that is to be maintained until we get past the pandemic. So there's not a defined time frame yet. I'm gonna ask, I did talk some with the administrator. I want to ask her if she wants to elaborate, and then I have an additional kind of point I wanted to make on that, and ask Trustee Steve if he has any questions. So Trustee Steve, you have any questions on it?
No, I do not.
Okay. Ms. Scott, any comment, or should I keep going?
That's fine. Just to elaborate, all of the lay personnel, meaning people who are not part of the union, such as myself, appointed positions like the fire chief, Chief Dyer, the deputy chief, the police chief, the deputy police chief, McInerney, also the AFSCME, all of the AFSCME employees, as well as the police clerks. Those are all of the people that are currently taking furlough days, which equates to, like you said, 10,000 roughly, and it is one furlough day per pay period. And we don't have an end date for that. Hopefully, as finances improve and the pandemic eases up and people are we're able to collect additional, taxes and things of that nature, and collect the revenue as far as water revenue that we were collecting in the past, then we'll reassess that. But for now, we don't have an end date for that, so we're all just taking furlough days.
Okay. Now, and to add to that, I do want to comment for elected officials. I'm going to ask Chris if you can email any elected official what a 10% donation back to the village would be. And I'm saying that in the sense of a donation, because by the ordinance, the salaries cannot be directly deducted from the Village of Dalton. However, elected officials can donate back. I will be making a 10% donation back for as long as the furlough days continue. But I need to know how much that is. So Chris, if you can email that to all of us so that we can opt in or opt out. I think that, you know, if our staff is doing it, that we should join in, but that's just my comment. I do want to make that encouragement, but I will not pressure anybody because that's not within my authority. But having said that, I do want at least everybody to know that what that amount is and how we can all pull together as a team to try to accomplish the same goal. That being said, I'm going to go to our warrant list deadline.
I do want to add one thing regarding the furloughs and the cost saving measures.
Yes, sir.
Those were implemented around, I think, the end of March, early April. Some of those measures will not be are not reflected in this set of financials due to the way that payroll is a few weeks behind implementation.
Okay. No, and I did notice it as well on the warrant list, and then some of the payrolls were a little bit larger because as people laid off, there were vacation payouts that while we didn't have as much on regular hourly payroll, we did have the vacation payouts, which kind of offset. So on a move forward basis, it should start decreasing, but it didn't reflect immediately. Next thing up, we're talking about the deadline for the warrant list. This was put on here because at a previous board meeting, we discussed seeing that we can have a time frame for the warrant list to be issued out to the board members that will be sufficient for everybody to look it over and ask questions, and hopefully just be a little bit more concise with the board meeting. But of course, everybody's within their right to ask questions. So I did email over, Chris sent to me and I sent to the board the packet that establishes the deadlines. The warrant list will be out to to all of the board on the Thursday preceding a board meeting. So I looked at all the dates. That date is in hand, and my hope or encouragement again for the board would be if we get it that's enough time that they can look it over, ask questions, so that way when we come to the meeting, there will be less of a request in terms of invoice, because when we're looking for the invoices, if we have 300 items on our warrant list, it's kind of difficult to expect for a finance Chris or anybody else to carry 300 invoices, which, you know, could be 1-page invoices or 10-page invoices with them. But if we have an opportunity to get ahead of it, let's try to do so. If we're not able to, then of course we have to do the best we can with the information that we have at the time. But having said that, Trustee Steve, do you have any thoughts on the warrant list time frame? Does that seem adequate for you?
It seems adequate for me, but it seems like you can get it to people 2 weeks before they're still gonna have questions. So a lot of stuff can be asked before the board meeting. But that's everybody's individual choice to do that. Like I said, even if we request to get it earlier, if you still choose to have questions, even if you get it earlier, you still gonna have questions. So I don't know. When anytime I have a question, I always just talk to the department heads. From my understanding, when I see it, when you get the warrant list, the department heads, you know what department it is, so you can always call, ask Janice, or ask, you know, the finance director or the administrator, what is this? What is this? So, but it seemed like Thursday was good. So we'll keep moving forward.
Okay.
I also want to note that some vendors, we do set the deadline for the day when all invoices are supposed to be due, but some vendors, their invoices are not prepared. Like an example would be Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's one invoice that we're always waiting until after the deadline we actually receive that invoice. But otherwise, that bill will not be processed until the subsequent bill run, which will create a risk of the vendor requiring either manual payment or discontinuation of services.
Okay, so in that case, in the case that would happen, let's say that the vendor doesn't send it to us until Friday and we are supposed to put it out on Thursday. How would you currently handle that?
Depending on how many vendors we're waiting on. So last warrant list, throughout this discussion, we were waiting on, I think, 3 or 4 vendors, which equated to about half of the warrant list.
Okay.
So we could have released it that Thursday, but half of the warrant list would have had to have been issued through manual checks because they were all insurance vendors they were waiting on responses from. So your general liability, your workers' comp, your health insurance.
Do they have the ability for like online viewing of the bills or other ways to access it?
I'd have to look into that. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, I would kind of just see if we could encourage maybe trying to use some of those means because U.S. Postal has some of the same challenges we do, and we may have other issues, but that would just kind of be my suggestion or thought. But having said that, I think on the warrant list, and my thing on for this one, of course, people can have questions and ask it. I just want to make sure that we have a process in place that we are to follow, and then that kind of helps us to see if there's a breakdown where it might have happened, if it's something that is coming from the board level, is it something coming from within the administration, or do we have a process in place? Beyond that, if somebody chooses to follow or not follow, I think we kind of handle that individually on a case-by-case basis, but at least we know what the expectation is from everybody.
And I wanted to add one thing, Trustee, since you spoke about the warrant list, so that I forgot to mention. So I spoke with Derek Blocker, who is head of the core consulting, which I think has been questioned a couple times about the, the money on the warrant list.
Yes.
And I think it's on average around $12,000 a month. Is that correct?
Yes,
somewhere
correct.
around there. So I spoke with him, and he has agreed. The consulting company has agreed to lower their cost to $6,200 a month. So they have cut their cost in half for us during this time because of everything going on. They agreed to cut their fees in half per month. So it's going to go down to $6,200.
Well, Derek, we thank you for that haircut you just took.
Right.
Yeah, but in all sincerity, no, that was a good point. We appreciate the work and working together. And having brought up that point, I think it's also something that I need to note. I've had some conversations that we've talked about, because another one that's come up is our Kasperian group, the financials that we do receive in their bill. So on the most recent invoice, they took a 20%, they gave us a 20% discount on that, and stated that they're willing to work with us more during this pandemic. Additionally, in terms of being able to get a better gauge or monitor how we're doing, every week, the Kasperi Group and Crest sends out an email to the board indicating the services that they did, and they've added the component of how many hours it took. So on a weekly basis, we can get an estimate of what the bill should be. And I'll say estimate because all things can't be included. It may fluctuate a little, but we should be in the ballpark. And any board member or anybody that sees it should have an idea even before the invoice come where we're at price wise and what services have been done. So while we're being mindful and trying to monitor it, and I watch as well, if we think that it's getting too high, we need to be able to pick up the phone and have a conversation. But they have given a 20% discount on our most recent bill and have indicated willingness to work with us during these times as well. So having said that, next thing on the agenda is our accounts payable procedure. This was put on the agenda because we did have an item that was held off of the warrant list or held from payment for 2 to 3 months because as we noticed it on the warrant list, it exceeded our budget. And we wanted to make sure that we had a process in place that verified before a check is authorized, how do we make sure that we don't exceed our budget and we stay within the means? I think we've been doing a good job, but every once in a while things slip through the cracks, and that's why we have these checks and balances in place. I'm going to ask Chris if you can just kind of talk through the process currently, or maybe the process that we were looking at moving forward, and So that way we know there's multiple checks to make sure that items don't grossly exceed our budget.
So the process we plan on implementing is that before a department head authorizes work that exceeds a certain dollar threshold, they will provide me that quote, which I will input into the software so that it will reflect as a expense prior and reflected against the budget prior to us actually receiving the invoice. Meaning that if an invoice is, let's say, $5,000, we'll receive it, it will be reflected against the budget. In May, we may not receive the invoice until August. The department head will already know that their budget has already been decreased by $5,000 prior to we getting to August.
Okay, and that's because this particular invoice, one of the challenges it seems like was the work was done in October and November, but the invoice was not received until March.
Correct.
So in that case, we had months of financials that did not include work done in November, but it was because it wasn't in the financials, there would not have been a tracking mechanism to make sure that it's to know that we exceeded, and we should have had that because we knew we authorized the work. So in this case, anything I think 10,000 was the amount. Am I right, Chris?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So anything that exceeds $10,000 will be put into our accounting system immediately. So that way, when we receive our financials, we'll know that if the budget has been met or exceeded, we can catch it a lot quicker. Trustee Steve, a question?
No question.
Okay. One point I do want to mention, and maybe just as a note right now, and hopefully we won't have to bring it up as another point. One thing to kind of look out, it seems like the process of getting invoices in and making sure that they're to the finance department and make it all the way through the process, there may be some holes in that process. So I would kind of suggest looking at that. And the reason that I say it is I was at the board meeting, we were talking about the payment for the vendor for the TIF district. Attorney Murphy mentioned that, he had submitted it in. It didn't make it to the warrant list for approval. So we were holding up on something that I don't know where the disconnect came in, but I think it's something that a process we may want to follow through. And I would say in a similar vein on this one, I know it didn't appear on the warrant list until March. I know you hadn't received until March. Could it be possible that it got mailed in and it didn't make it through the process totally, or did they send it late? We don't know, but I would be mindful or try to look at making sure that we do have something in place to kind of double check. So that would just be my suggestion loosely. But having said that, there was no need to hold up the board meeting, and since we're talking about the procedure, I just wanted to look at another area. But I think that's a good process moving forward so that we don't exceed our budget. Comments, thoughts, feedback? There being none, I think we're Melanie Fitness Center. This was added on to the agenda last week because we wanted to have it done prior to our board meeting, but we still had some conversation about it earlier. Trustee Steve, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else or on this.
No.
Okay.
I do want to. I'm looking at the comments, but we can address one question. Somebody asked, I'm sorry, Giovanni, I'm just looking at the question. With the Cellar Melanie Fitness, will there be a list of businesses that will be allowed to make that location? Mainly asking, will this be another liquor store? This will not be another liquor store, and we want to keep it a gym, a service for the community. We want to keep it that. So that's what we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for people who can keep it a gym or some type of health and wellness, but it will not be a liquor store.
All right.
That's it.
No, having said that, before we go into the additional citizens address, if there's anybody on the board or administration that has a comment for the good of the group.
So I would like to make a comment. We are going to be putting something out, but unfortunately the sticker sales have been delayed. We're hoping to start selling stickers this coming Monday.
Okay,
Okay, so we had some
thank you.
kinks in the road, and we're gonna be doing it this Monday, and we have to just get some things together because we did have an employee that contracted the coronavirus.
Okay,
And so everybody who came in contact with that person that happened to be in the water department, so the entire water department got cleaned out. Essentially, we don't have any employees, so we kind of had to run a skeleton crew. That's why we weren't open Monday, trying to just get everything together with the computer and trying to, I don't have a password, for example, to certain software, to the computer software for the water department. We had to pull, I had to come over to the water department today. An individual from the housing department, we had to pull her because she used to work in the water department. So we're just trying to get things going until obviously those people are better and healthy and able to come back to work. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
okay. Thank you for that announcement. Okay, and with that being said, I think we're on citizens addressed. If I can, oh, one other point that I almost missed, and I don't know how I did. Our budget, and this is an area that I think we're gonna have to dive in a little. We'll have to dive in a little bit more. A lot of things have come up. Our annual budget, well, the fiscal year ends on April 30th, so May 1st we would be looking at having a budget. We should have had one, and with balancing multiple priorities, we are in the process now of budget. I do believe that we had some draft pre-COVID of what we were looking at on the budget. Adjustments have to be made based on new realities. So, and having a draft that should make it easier, not easy, but easier to move the process forward. That's something that generally the county would need us to have by July 30th at the latest. However, who knows what their time frame is. They may push it back or not. But in any event, we do not anticipate or do not want to wait until the very last day. Our goal is to have a budget in place as quickly as possible, so that way we are able to better track what we're doing and what we're spending against. But having said that, I don't know if Chris, if you had any input you wanted to make on that.
We are working on implementing the budget with all of the changes and furloughs and those types. We need to make adjustments to those areas. And once we make those adjustments, then we can reflect all of the changes. The budget will be at least in a draft format for review purposes.
Okay. All right. So having said that, that will conclude this portion of the Finance Committee meeting. I will ask that we go into the citizens address. And if Giovanni, if you have any questions that you see out there, please let her rip.
All righty, here we go. When will you have the clerk to make available the digital copies of what is being discussed for the residents?
I'm going to ask. Well, my thought was, and somebody correct me, these items were sent out on the agenda. I believe that the email also had the financials in it, or did I get that wrong?
No, the agenda doesn't list. You know how you were referencing all those different pages? The
Yes.
agenda doesn't list all the financials. It just lists like an outline of the agenda.
And
Okay.
so moving forward, you want to put that on there. We'll make sure when the next meeting will on the agenda link, we'll have the link, the PDF for the stuff we're discussing.
Okay. So yeah, in future meetings, we'll have both the agenda and the financials packet included.
Okay. The next is, when will the trustees and mayor make the clerk have digital copies for residents? This may be the same question. When it comes to materials being discussed, such as monthly finance report. So I guess that's the same question. So we can start that for next month.
Now, and if I can, I will want to comment to that. So, I mean, things do revolve around all of us doing it. So when I hear make the mayor, make the trustees, we do want to work collectively. None of us can. It's kind of like the furlough days and the donation. It's voluntary. all of us are accountable to the residents of the community. So I say that in the sense that all of us as trustees, we work with the clerk. The clerk works with us, and we want to make sure that I try my best to not answer for anybody. Having said that, I think in this event, there was communication, the information comes in, I believe something to be done that it wasn't, and that's my miscommunication. So I'll say that I know that the clerk, the mayor, and everybody and everybody on the board works as hard as they can to give the information to the residents. As things move forward, we're going to continue to work our best to get the information to you.
Okay, next question. Why isn't the credit card expenses not being discussed as promised? And will those invoices be made public digitally?
The credit card expenses are actually included in our warrant list. That is the reason that we have two separate warrant lists. There's the electronics warrant lists, and there is the paper check warrant list. So yeah, at our board meeting, we had Register 165, which was all of the checks that were issued out not manually, but that were input and issued out as paper checks. Then there was 164, which was electronic, and that's the one that holds the credit card information. If there's something on the warrant list, at least for me, if I see it, whether that's the credit card or anything else, I would ask a question about it as a board member having questions. And I think, I know Trustee Henyard, Trustee Steve, Trustee Brown, we all have the opportunity to ask those questions. I believe if there's no questions asked, that would mean no board member has questions about the items on there. However, that warrant list is available either via, you can email me and I can get that information to any of the residents, because but there is also a FOIA process, so you can get the information via FOIA, and it is listed on our warrant list. So just by FOIA-ing or requesting a copy of the item, it can be made available to any resident that seeks.
Okay, and then if you wouldn't mind, maybe just say your email address. That way they'll have it in case they do want to.
jhouse@vodalton.org.
Okay. The next question is, it's not really related. How much is the city sticker?
City sticker is $40 if purchased before the due date.
Okay, and the final question
Wait,
is
one more thing. I'm sorry. Let me add one thing too. We did extend. There will be no late fee for the stickers until August 1st. So that gives people ample time to purchase their sticker. And also that's us extending, just assisting people that have issues maybe going on financially due to the pandemic and whatnot. And also because we are getting a little bit of a late jump on the sticker sale. So you have through the month of July to get your sticker with no penalty. And as always, seniors 65 and older, it's $5 for your first vehicle.
It's $5. You see all this gray hair I got? Do I qualify?
Me too. The village gave me this.
Okay. Next question, please.
This is the last one. I don't know. It's not really related, but it said, how large is the Dalton Police Department?
I do not have the actual roster of how many people we have. Chris, would you happen to know that, or is that something we need to obtain and we can do in general comments at the next board meeting?
I don't have a number generally off the top of my head. I'd have to look.
Okay. Yeah, right. So that's one during general announcements. The question was, how many employees do we have in the can you repeat it for me, please?
Sure. It just says, how large is the Dalton Police Force?
Okay. So I'm going to interpret that as how many employees do we have on our police force, and I'll update that in our general announcement section of the next board meeting.
Okay. Okay. Another question came in about the warrant list. I know that you already stated that if somebody needed it, of course, they could email you. You've provided your email address already, but there's another question that says, my question is concerning the warrant list being made digitally to the public.
Okay, so the digitally to the public, I think that's a question that probably should be asked at the board meeting because that falls under the clerk's purview or her list of responsibilities. In terms of it being done, there it is. And I think the legal requirement to be met is that it be done via FOIA. So that would be my first suggestion to anybody that has the question. If they want to know why the clerk is not doing it, I would encourage that somebody ask Clerk Dugan if that's possible, and if not, why not?
Okay, and that was the final question.
Okay, with that being said, I'm going to see if I'll make the motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it'll be a motion and a second. Quick roll call. Trustee House is aye. Trustee Steve.
Aye.
And thank everybody once again for all of your feedback. Take care. Have a great evening.